Good evening, and welcome to another episode of The Fire Caves, a Star Trek Deep Space Nine podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Perry.
And I'm your host, David. Tonight we're talking about The Expanse Book 8, Tiamat's Wrath, instead of talking about Deep Space Nine. But before we continue, you can find us on Facebook, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube as The Fire Caves, a Star Trek Deep Space Nine podcast.
That is correct, and as I say every single week, you should find us and follow us because we are great, we're awesome, we're a good time, and we're obviously nerds because we're carrying forward with a book series. Now, just real quick, obviously, we weren't here last week, and then the week before that, we did a special where we talked about the varying foods inspired by Star Trek and kind of gave you a little taste test sampling that we did. You can find that exclusively on our YouTube channel. There is no podcast that you can listen to of that episode, which what sense would that make if you think about it? We were sampling foods and drinks. So what would you do? Just be sitting there listening to us going, mm, that's good. So no, go watch the episode. Please feel free to, tell us what you thought of any of the recipes that we threw out there. Also, there are links to some of the alcohols that you can buy at the Star Trek Wine or the Star Trek Spirits websites on those episodes on that episode. So go ahead and check that out. And don't forget to also, if you're interested, check the link for the book, which is available, the cookbook, which is available on Amazon. And no, just to let everyone know, we are not paid in any way to endorse any of those things. It was just something cool that we decided to do, and that's where we got the stuff from. So if you wanted to get it, we just tell you where to go and get it. That's it. No one's paying us. No one's strong arming us or anything like that. That's just what it was. Shameless, easy promotion for them. There you go. So, but yes, now tonight we are talking about the Expanse series. This is Book 8, Tiamat's Wrath, which I had to look it up. Tiamat was a five-headed goddess apparently from Dungeons and Dragons. Didn't know that, and based off of Mesopotamian mythology. So obviously, the writers of these books are also huge nerds. So right up
Mhm.
our warehouse.
Yep.
So yeah, whenever they're going to get into it, I hope that you have been reading along with us as we've gone through this series. I know we have not been quite as regular. Sometimes we do like little like midway updates of the books, and then sometimes we just wait and do the whole thing. And tonight we're just kind of waiting, and we just are doing the whole thing.
Yeah.
So hopefully you have been just as eager to get through this as we have. And again, before we start anything else, I will apologize because it took us so long to get through this one, mainly because of me. So, with there being only one more book in the series, I promise it will not take me um, as long to get through that, so we can roll right into uh, the next story.
Right.
All right, so there, all of my things are out of the way. I'm ready to discuss the book, and as always, David, I'd like to start with you because I know that you read it and finished it long before I did. So, what were your first thoughts, first impressions when you finished this one?
Yeah. This one definitely has more of that proto-molecule angle to it. The last book was kind of set up to this
Hmm.
book. People online sometimes talk about how the books are like kind of like three little trilogies, and that means that book 7 was its own like part one of three. It sets up, the former Martian colony that has Laconia, which has now tried to conquer humanity through their proto molecule inspired technology. They were able to successfully kind of conquer humanity that way, but their grip is very tenuous. They have military power, but do they have true allegiance to them? And of course, our band of ragamuffins aren't going to put up with any no nonsense. And it means that our team is scattered once again, like book 5. The crew was scattered. That's the middle book of that little trilogy, of the Earth Mars belt kind of conflict going on. How do you handle the opening of the ring gates, and how do you navigate the belt trying to break away its own political unit? This one is it was fun because we were really it feels like we're really finally on the edge of getting some of those big questions answered. Looking forward to book 9 and getting those answers to those questions. Was surprised by some of the things they chose to do here. For example, High Council Duarte, who was kind of set up as the big bad, he is incapacitated halfway through the book. So he turns out to not be the big bad. There isn't really a big bad in this book. There are a bunch of minor antagonists that we
Yeah,
had to work against. But the creatures, the alien, the wormhole beings. I said you earlier today. I said wormhole aliens when I was talking with you about the book, and I was like, wait a minute, that's some Star Trek.
it has a way of making it makes itself into almost everything. It's been around
Yeah,
for so long, you can't help it.
yeah. The gate guardians. I don't know what we want to call them, but those mysterious beings that are able to wipe away matter at their own
I will admit
whim.
I have been calling them the wormhole aliens in my head like the
Yeah,
whole time.
we should just start.
Or
Just do it.
yeah,
They're
that's
wormhole
what I was
aliens.
calling them, wormhole aliens, because I know that they're not. I mean, those are ring gates and whatever else, but I mean, it worked. Wormhole
Right.
aliens,
Yeah.
you know. Um, so yeah, that's what I've been calling them too. But yeah,
Yeah. So yeah, I like this one. There are a number of characters, unfortunately, who are absent. Abasarala, first line of the book, she's passed.
oh,
Amos is kind of MIA for most of the book. Um, Naomi is there. Holden only has minor parts in the book. In fact, he only has 3 point of view chapters. He's always been a point of view character throughout the entire series. And this one, if I understand correctly, has the least number of Holden point of view chapters. We have the opening chapter, the intermission chapter, and the epilogue. So prologue, intermission, epilogue. And that means that this book has a kind of a unique feel.
mhm.
We get a lot more of other characters like LV, the scientist, and the young girl whose name I'm forgetting at the moment.
Teresa Duarte.
Teresa, yes, that's right, Teresa, yes. So the young 14-year-old girl. A lot of storylines from those two characters' perspectives. Naomi and Bobby and Alex get some stuff going, but Bobby
Yeah,
passes away halfway through.
yes,
Um, yeah, this book definitely, in some ways, enforced the most changes that we've seen so far, which is
yeah,
interesting here so close to the end.
absolutely. I will say for me, this book definitely gave me more of what I wanted in regards to proto-molecule stuff. We're going into new systems, unexplored systems, totally alien systems, and unfortunately, we're apparently blowing them up. And causing all kinds of problems for the rest of the surviving ring gates and stuff like that. We know that 2 ring gates are destroyed at one point. Also, this is when High Council Duarte seems to have his issue. He was fine, and then they blew up the one system, and now he's basically dead. Like, he's reduced to kind of not even childlike to say, he's just one step up from drooling on himself.
Yeah.
And there seems to be no fixing that.
Hmm.
But one thing about this book that was I don't know if I like it or not. There is a significant amount of change. Like you said, we got a lot of characters who die. We get a lot of characters who we hadn't really got to focus on a lot throughout this 9 book series, and suddenly they're front and center here. Now, I mean, this is not new to the Expanse series. They've introduced other characters to us before. Remember, like Dr. Pax, for example, was one. And I mean, the whole first book, we were all about Detective Miller and some of his friends, stuff like that, before he really got into Holden and Naomi and all of them.
Hmm.
So it's not uncharacteristic, which is something that again, I can't say if I like it or not, because you're typically, especially when I read books that are a part of a series, right? Um, you have a main character or a main couple of characters, and they make it pretty much all the way through.
Hmm.
You might have one of them that dies, but it's much later, and typically it's at a point where it has such a greater significance. And I mean, it's not to say that the loss of any of the characters that we see in this book were not significant. But I guess feeling like you would have had them for longer. I don't know if that makes any sense. Like if you would have just gotten more interaction with them before they passed. Like Bobby's death, wow, well, great for the character, right? She goes
Hmm.
out just the way that you would kind of expect a character like Bobby to go out.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's like I could have done with them giving us more of her, like her internals as she's struggling to kind of be this leader that everybody sees her as, and it's something that's mentioned a little bit in the book, how she's very forthright, very upfront and opinionated to a certain degree, and people have obviously come to just rely on that. But I guess I would like to see a little bit more of that struggle, a little bit more of that pushback. Now, that is something that we miss out on because there is also a significant time jump from, so watching her development, we don't get, what is that? We're missing like 20 years. Is that right? 20 years?
Between book 6 and 7 was 30 years.
30 years.
Yeah.
Okay. So, yeah, I mean, so that means that we were most associated with them in the first few books. They were all in their 20s. And so then
Or early 30s or so. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
and so then, here they are coming out of this, the other side of, you know, the back end of their 50s, early 60s,
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah. You're probably right.
Um,
They're probably mid late 20s.
I was pretty sure
They
that they
have to
were all
be.
in their 20s because I mean, because most
Yeah.
of the time when in these latter books,
Hmm.
I believe like even in book 7 when it talks about them, it was saying like Holden was like 55, Roberta was
I'm definitely
53,
bending
something
the
like that.
characters to match my own age. I'm what
I
34 now,
understand.
so
I understand. I understand. I would want to do the same. And that's also another thing I was going to talk about that's a disconnect to me. I'm so used to reading stories where the characters are either start off significantly younger than me and then, they kind of age up, or when they start, they are my age.
right.
Or when they start, they're significantly older than me. It's weird to come into it. And when I started reading the book, they were, again, about 10 years younger than me. And
Right.
now here we are at the end of it, and they're 30, 40 years, well, yeah,
Yeah,
older than me,
just thinking
whatever.
about Holden's life. He was in the Earth Navy for a couple years, and then he got kicked out. He was on the Canterbury for a year or two, and then that's when things started. So that has to be like 25 ish
Well, I was gonna
max.
say, I think that Holden was the oldest.
Yeah.
Um,
Oh, oldest? I always
yeah,
figured
I
he was
think.
kind of in the middle there
Well, no,
somewhere.
besides Alex, Holden was the oldest. That's what it was, because Alex had already served in the Martian military for 20 years and then
And
had
it,
successfully aged out,
right,
retired.
right.
And so Alex was the oldest, then Holden, then it's a toss up between Amos, Naomi, and Bobby. And I think Bobby was actually the youngest because she was still in her prime of her military career. She was cashiered out of the military. She did not
Yeah.
age out. So I'm going to say, I think that Bobby was the youngest. I think she was probably right at, maybe like
20,
21, 22,
30.
very
Yeah.
idealistic,
Which
very
makes
hardcore. It
which
makes
makes
a
me
lot of sense.
Well, it
Yeah.
makes me rethink all the scenes that we had in this book of her and Bobby and Alex together, because Bobby's kind of like the leader, and Alex has always been the happy-go-lucky pilot.
Yeah.
But
That's what he said. He's just a glorified bus driver.
yeah,
He has said it many times, and it's like it is hard when especially when you don't see a physical representation of them. You have to keep some of these things in mind because yeah, it's like they talk about him. He's older. He's bald. He's got the little old man stomach going and whatever. And I'm just like, yeah, he's probably closer to 70 than 60, I would
hmm,
say.
yeah,
And yeah, I was like that. I mean, it's fine. It makes sense. I'm not saying he can't, do what he's doing, and clearly he can. But then it was like there he talks about he's gotten married again, and he's got all this other like family stuff. It's like, yeah, I had to keep reminding myself that makes more sense because he's 70 years old. He's
right,
nearly 70. Whereas Bobby is still, you know, at what, she's 50, 51 at the oldest,
hmm,
and so she's still very much kind of feeling her in her prime, doing stuff, lead, all that. I mean, just Yeah, completely separate differences, and I just really liked it, but then it was like having to stop and remind myself every time was a bit of a struggle, but,
Yeah,
I
there's
really liked it though.
well, I will say kind of what you're I think you're hinting at is it the characters don't quite feel their age as they're supposed to be. Like if you had told me they'd been 20 years, like I remember the book saying it'd been 30 years. If they had said 20, I feel like I could believe some of the like the characters seem a little bit younger than what 30 years would seem to imply
Yeah,
for characters.
well, and
So,
we're supposed to remember too that, there's been medical advances, right? The auto dock, for example, on all of the ships and everything else. Even heck, Avasarala in the last book, when she comes in and talks with Drummer, she was talking about her extreme age as well, but she had, they had some surgeries and whatever else to replace certain parts of her and whatever else. And I mean, she was old then
right,
in book 7,
right,
and then she finally dies in book 8. But
yeah,
you know, um, and we always knew that she was the old lady, so they never expressly say how old she is,
hmm
but they kind of give you the impression that she was probably like because she was already what, 80, according to the book anyway. She was already at least 80 when we before
first
the
met her.
time jump. Right,
Yeah,
before the time jump. And so then we give her another 30 years. I mean, yeah.
she has to at least have been at yeah, she has to have been at least pushing 100. Well,
I think
the
that she
be
was I
beyond
think
it
she
is
was
more
yeah, I
likely.
think
Yeah,
she was well over 100. We don't get a solid how old she was when she died, but I
right,
think that by book 7, you would not be wrong for thinking that she was probably around maybe like 110.
right,
You would not be out of the range, I think, if you thought that she was 110. And then, of course, the very first thing they mentioned in book 8, Avasarala has died. So I was like, okay, so what? The span of time between book 7 and 8, she was probably, yeah, 120, 130 years old, and
hmm
then that was it.
yeah,
That's done.
something. Yeah,
And but still, so they make you think that there is enough that you can do to still maintain a lot of life, a lot of vitality for a very long time.
right.
So you wouldn't again be wrong if when you're reading the book, it takes you a moment to remind yourself that you're not reading about a bunch of 20-year-olds or even 30-year-olds. You've got to remember, oh yeah, he's probably 60 years old while he's running around, and they do a good job. Like they talk about Naomi having the silver in her hair, and Holden, he's all gray in his beard and his hair and everything else.
Right.
But yeah, they let you know they've definitely aged. It's just medicine has gotten to a point where they're still good, which is incredible in its own right. Y'all should be doing a bunch of other things. I guess it's weird how normal. I mean, obviously normal for them because they've lived that life. But to me, I'm just like, yeah, where can I get my hands on an auto dock so I can up my years a bit.
Right. Right. Yeah.
So one thing that I'm gonna want us to talk about a lot is, of course, the protomolecule and the
Wormhole
various
aliens.
worlds and the wormhole
Oh
aliens and
yeah.
everything else. These aliens, the technology that we see from them and everything, I love every single bit of it. I think this is probably the most original take on anything alien that I've seen or read. I don't know, in probably 20 or 30 years. I mean, Star Trek has kind of, always been my foundation for a lot of for pretty much all things sci-fi. And then of
Right.
course you get into things with like Star Wars and um, you know, uh, Firefly and all that. But to come up with something to where it's like, are they sentient? Are they just reactionary?
Yeah.
um what's going on here? And like even when you get more information, it really just seems to lead to even more questions. At one point, Elvie is saying um th- that the system that they found was basically like a brain, and they blew it up, and so now the system has become aware of them, almost in the way that like your body becomes aware of an infection.
Right.
And so now it's trying to throw them off like your body would an infection. So it doesn't make you think that that you're dealing with something that has sentience at first, but then she continues to describe it, and it's like it's more that their consciousness and their level of development is so far beyond ours that you're just more like a germ they just became aware of.
Yeah.
So you wouldn't have a way of contacting them or communicating with them.
Yeah, yeah, they exist. I mean, they haven't used this term in the book so far, but on a different plane of existence.
Hmm.
They exist somewhere else. It's not clear where. Um, I will say I agree that this is the most uniquely alien series, except for one. Last year around this time, you might remember I was talking about the book and the series, The Three Body Problem.
Hmm.
That series has a very unique but um, plausibly realistic take on alien life. Um, the alien species that humanity interacts with in that series um, is affected by the three body problem, which is the idea that in physics, like you can have two objects spinning around each other, like the Earth around the sun or the moon around the Earth, or even just two objects around each other. When you introduce a third object, it gets chaotic. And so, this planet that these aliens live on circle around a three sun system, and it causes havoc all over the place, which includes um, solar winters, solar summers where like everything's just too hot to exist or too cold to exist, and so like these aliens have evolved to survive these extreme temperature fluctuations. But the show actually doesn't talk so much about the alien physiology as much as about alien or just how physics might
Hmm.
change. So to put it another way, the expanse is using mystical, even magical technology that doesn't necessarily have a clear explanation for how it works.
Yeah.
The three body problem, because it's written by a physicist, he does try and actually give physics a realistic, or to try to make the physics realistic in his books and in the show. Well, the books, the show came later, of course. Um, so yeah, I would say that if you like the uniqueness of the Expanse, the Three Body Problem series, I know you like the Cthulhu stories.
Hmm.
Imagine something kind of Cthulhu-ish mixed with the Expanse kind of just unique alien stuff. And I think you'll find an interesting blend there with the Three Body Problem.
Okay. I did not
Yeah.
read that series, so I will definitely go and check it out. You're right. They do use the protomolecule, though, or the not just the protomolecule, but the protomolecule aliens as a way to kind of get around having to hard science things. But
Hmm.
rather than it being like a drop-in plot device, the way that a lot of sci-fi does it, they do attempt to explain it, but it's always like the explanation is intentionally vague
Right.
or limited because the people trying to explain it are doing it from of a particular frame of reference where they're trying to demonstrate they have some sort of control or understanding, which we keep seeing gets blown up every time. Like
Yeah.
every time someone tries it, they think they have a concrete line of understanding on this thing. Inevitably, they're wrong,
Right.
and it seems like the overwhelming message that we're given each time is you don't know what you're doing, quit messing with it. Like that really seems to be it. You're not poking a bear with a stick. You're an ant poking a sun over
Yeah.
here that you're going to get burned. Like you're
Yeah.
there's not a long enough stick for you to do this safely, so
Yes.
stop doing it.
Yeah. The
And
level of hubris of
yes, and that seems to be the main trapping and failing of every single person that has anything to do with the protomolecule stuff, except
right.
for Holden. Really,
Yeah.
he's the only one who's just like, you guys are all playing this game, and I don't want to play. Like, I don't want us involved at all. And I'm trying to make you all see that the best thing for you to do is to take that crap and dump it into the sun or wherever and just leave it alone. Just forget
Right.
about it. But
Right.
everybody's like, nah, we're gonna use it and inject people and make them immortal, or we're gonna go over here and nuke this diamond planet because we
Yeah.
can, and expect no repercussions of their actions whatsoever. And then when
Yeah.
things happen, they're like, well, that was her fault, or oh, that was his fault. Like, that's the whole thing over
Yeah.
and over again. And it's just like, and even in this book, Elvie, Dr. Okoye, she's doing a lot of the heavy lifting here when it comes to the explanation of the science,
Yeah.
and trying, and she kind of is on that same path. Like, as much as she wants to be the scientist who kind of, who makes these breakthroughs and these levels of understanding like that, the more she gets into it, the more that she does get to interact with the protomolecule, the more she starts to think like Holden, the way he did all the way back in, like book 2 and 3, and she's just like, we really shouldn't do this, like not without extensive study. And even then, like, this is probably like lifetimes worth of work. And you just want to come in here and shoot missiles at it. Like, what's wrong with you? And of course, I mean, they lose a lot when they do that. They
Right.
start losing time. She loses a chunk of her leg. Her husband loses his foot. I mean, that was a terrible, like, very graphic, tragic scene
Yeah.
when
And it comes out of nowhere
happened.
too. It just
Yeah, it
happened.
really does. And it was just like I read that part twice because I was
Me
trying
too.
to envision how they would do it in the show.
Yeah.
And I was like,
Yeah.
man, just I would love to see how that played out, the visualization for that.
Well, it
But
was a
yeah, it
great
is a
scene.
really quick scene.
And it was great too because Elvie, she says as the only one who had ever encountered these beings before, she had the wherewithal to act. She was the only one who was able to act and tell the ship to like leave as quickly as possible and escape, which is how they survived the utter destruction of the ring space. The Medina station and everything else in there is gone. And
Wiped out,
Medina's
man.
been around since the beginning. I mean, talking about characters dying in this book. I mean, Medina Station was originally the Behemoth, was originally the Nauvoo. Like to see that ship, that station is gone is a big deal. Like, oh man, how can we come back from this?
And yeah, and it was a nice kind of like factory reset for ring space and the slow zone. Like, they have, once again, people have become complacent. Medina Station had changed multiple times. It had now changed hands multiple times. It was operating now as the front of the Laconia, forward operations.
Right?
There were all the ships and everything else that were in the slow zone and everything else, now all of them gone. The only thing there is still the old alien artifact station that
Yeah.
has been there from, the beginning, which makes sense because it was alien. It was supposed to be
Right.
there.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I mean, just a complete wiping out of all things that were remotely tied to humans.
Right.
And yeah, it's just like, if it wasn't for her, a lot more than a chunk of leg and a foot would have been missing. And there were people who were more severely impacted. Like, if I'm not mistaken, one of the reasons that she, like you said, yeah, she had the only presence of mind to move the ship through, because everybody else was just like, what's happening? And just in
Right.
such a state of whatever the thing was that was affecting, because they don't really describe it per se, but it's like I took it as kind of like the worst headache ever
Mm,
that kind of causes them to be in these weird kind of nearly catatonic states while
right.
they're dealing with all of this stuff. So, not something I would wish on anyone or myself, but yeah, thank goodness for her getting them through.
Yeah.
Otherwise, man,
Yeah. Well, it's an interesting thing. I like the way the book presented this hubris on behalf of the Laconians. They say that
yeah,
we need to test if what we're encountering is just some sort of physical barrier, like it's just physics. We send too many ships through the ring gates and something responds. Is that like the tide where you just gotta know it and overcome it? Or are they actual beings, wormhole aliens that we need to interact with? And the one way we learn to interact with them is to teach them not to attack us. If they bited us, we bited them.
Yeah, that was their genius plan. We need to know one way or another if these aliens are a threat, so we're gonna be a threat first.
Yeah, we're gonna
That's the
piss them off as
worst.
much as possible. Yeah,
Yeah.
they might have destroyed the whole alien civilization before us, which we're using the tools for as to like enact the very plans we have to counteract their destroyers. But let's give it a go.
In a lot of ways, the Laconians reminded me of the Roman Empire,
Mm,
with the rapid expansion, High Council, Duarte, basically the emperor, and this weird kind of militaristic bent that they have. It's not a you're not supposed to really have attachments. They kind of don't want you to do anything overly, emotional or whatever, especially not in the initial days of the founding of the great Laconian Empire, right? And yeah, there's just so much about them that I was just kind of like, these ships and their officers, they kind of remind me of like Roman centurions and how they're just kind of going about their duties, and they're so dedicated to this idea of Laconia and the High
mm,
Council. It's like, yeah, probably not the best model to build your new society off of. I mean, it's been tried multiple times in human history, and it may have its merit. Don't get me wrong, there might be things that you can, distill from it, that you
right.
can base certain aspects of society off of,
Right.
but to really lean into that kind of um, leadership, society, culture, all of it, it just seems inherently self-defeating,
Yeah.
you know. And that's kind of
Yeah.
what I felt like for Laconia, especially in this book.
Yeah. Yeah. The history of Rome is fascinating because I mean it was one of the longest lasting empires in terms of just longevity, but it collapsed, and the fall and decline of the Roman Empire is a study in and of itself. The interesting idea that Duarte thinks that what the solution would be is a single leader that was immortal that could steer humanity through all of these.
I mean, yeah, interesting premise. The reason that the Romans fell was not because their idea was bad, but because they kept changing leaders due to voting them out or death,
Well, they didn't vote
whatever.
them out, but yeah.
Well, yeah, you know what I meant. Um, gently asked him to leave.
Oh, oh, yeah.
um,
Okay.
yeah. Um, and so yeah, his solution is you just need one voice, one person forever, or at least for long enough that it's the groundwork has been so firmly laid that you can't mess it up.
Right.
Because while he does, obviously he's talking about living forever, and he's going to be, you know 200-300 years. He also was preparing Teresa to step in and
Yeah.
lead for him when eventually his time was up.
Well,
So
it's funny though because the book presents that as like he's changed his mind about that. Like that's a new idea that he's something like, oh yeah, let's let my daughter in on this technology, and that is undermining his case about being the eternal ruler.
mhm.
Um, I also love that we've come to find out that Cortazar is has been BSing his way the whole time. Like this immortality thing that he's been doing with Duarte, he's actually using him as a guinea pig before he does it to himself. And he wants to kill Teresa so that he can see what happens when the drone
The drones,
dogs,
yeah.
when they remake someone into like the zombie version of themselves. Like, how do they do it? So
How do
he
they
can.
do it, and then how much of themselves do they actually retain? That seems to be his main question. I mean, it's
Right.
important to remember though, the Cortazar is one of those, he's one of those scientists that we're introduced to fairly early on. They had done something to him where they cut out section of his brain, which left him without any kind of emotional grounding whatsoever. So they
His
effectively turned him into
morality
a yeah,
was affected. Actually, just to point out, the character was not introduced until basically the previous book. There was a short story that's set before that, which gives the origin story for him from the Memories Legion short stories. But when it came to the TV show, they went ahead and introduced the character in full by like season two.
yeah,
So we got to know Cortazar from early on, and he's a fascinating character because yeah, the origin story about him, they just to give us some minor spoilers, they sit him down and they ask him some questions about morality, basically like, is it okay to sacrifice humanity, like sacrifice human beings on behalf of the greater good for humanity? And his initial response is like, no, that's horrifying. And they do this quick little procedure on him. They don't even cut into him. They like just zap his brain. They ask him the exact same question, and he's immediately like, of course, like ends justify the means. It's all about the
right.
science, baby. And he becomes this evil character. But I'm glad they showed him in the show because I don't think the character quite got enough to do to show off how evil he was before
No,
in the
no,
books. In the
he really
show,
didn't.
he's immediately like,
He's
yeah,
ruthless. He's
yeah,
awful. He's just a. I mean, I wouldn't even necessarily say he's awful. Right? I know I just said that, but mainly because he lacks the emotional context to make what he does awful. He is totally reactionary.
right,
He's trying to do this science, and when you interfere with his ability to do the science, he does whatever is necessary to get back to doing the science. So
right,
if that means he just needs to move to the left and keep going, he will. If he has to drill a hole in your chest to get back to the board he was writing on, he will. Like
yeah.
there's no disconnect of there's no measurement of extremes for him in this.
Well,
So
you say that, and I start thinking. Did you ever watch the Netflix show about Black Mirror? Have you ever watched any of the Black
yeah,
Mirror?
I've watched a few of them. I've not watched all of them, but I've seen some of them. Yeah, like I think
So,
I watched the first one where the prime minister from Britain they want him to
oh
do the pig thing, and
yes, that's
then I
episode one.
yeah, and then there was the one where the guy from I guess he was like a CEO or something. He had some kind of weird technology where he could like make people miniature or whatever, and he was sticking them inside of
A Star Trek style
Star Trek esque, yeah, and as his way of kind of getting some kind of weird
sex
control or
fantasy. Yeah,
revenge, whatever, off of them. Right, and if they didn't
yeah,
do what he wanted, he would turn them into other creatures and stuff, and was basically slow torturing them.
yeah.
And yeah,
Well, I'll just say that I had to stop watching Black Mirror last season because I think it was the first episode of last season where the story they were telling, this we're talking about Corzar, reminds me like actually there are levels of extreme that I had never thought about before and don't want to think about. I still am horrified by that episode. And there's plenty of horrifying episodes in Black Mirror. That's the whole point. It is supposed to be the darkest example of how technology could destroy us. And yeah, Cortazar is actually kind of tame compared to some of the Black Mirror episodes.
yeah, and I think that's because you mentioned Black Mirror, and I know that they have like a team of writers who you know does this, puts that together and stuff like that. So I feel like in order to get to those levels of depravity, I guess, I feel like you need more than one person to come up with it. Like I know that from my own experience, I can come up with some pretty, "Oh, I want this person to suffer kind of stuff. But I have a limit. I have a limit. There's a baseline that I will never cross.
Right.
So when you are intentionally trying to get to something that causes that revulsion factor, you need to have someone else who can go further. And unfortunately, for humans, it seems anyway, we do that best in groups.
Yeah.
So,
Oh, no doubt.
there
Well,
we again we all like I said, we all have a limit, but when we get into more of a communal mindset on certain things, I feel like we can come up with worse things as a group than we ever could as a individual. And so I think that's why stuff like that works on shows like Black Mirror, because you probably have one person who like pitches a general idea, then you probably got two or three other people who kind of throw in here and there, and they bat it around, and then someone's like, you know what? Not dark enough. Let's see what else we can do. And then before you know it, you've got half the room disgusted, the other half is excited, and there's that one weird outlier somewhere. I know I said half and half, but whatever. There's always that one who's like, yes, yes. This is and that's the one that everybody's afraid of.
Uh,
That's the one that no one sits with at lunch.
yeah.
That guy. And I
Ugh.
feel like that's the one who signs off on a lot of these Black Mirror episodes because even again, the few that I've seen, I'm always like, who comes up with this? Like, how did this get out there? This is not the brainchild of one person. It
Right.
started as a general idea, and then the rest of you freaks threw in with it, and now we've got this horrible thing.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
but I think that's kind
Quite
of
a
how this goes with Cortazar, because we know that this is a duo that writes these books. So
yes.
again, they probably did their own, got a wall up, brainstorming board, whatever. Let's do this, let's do that. What if Cortazar did this? And again, they reached a consensus pretty quick because they're decent people. So it's like we can only highlight him doing so much because we don't want to. I mean, we allude to vivisection over and over again, but does it ever happen? No, because we don't want to see it. He's got these two forever children in the pen over here. We know he's been experimenting on them, but are we going to describe it? No, because we're decent people. We
Right.
will allude to it, but we will never say, um, you know what in detail happened.
Right.
Does High Council Duarte have a mysterious pen of people that he's exposing to the protomolecule? Yes, he does, and we've mentioned it exactly one time, and we're never going to mention it again because it was horrible to think about, and that's it.
Right.
So I think that's how all those things work out.
yeah. Um. Yeah. A lot to talk about, but I think we said
Well,
it.
and so on that just made me think though on that point, like we're in book 8 of this series. The whole stuff about Laconia and the High Council and what they've been up to these past 30 years and everything else. Um, there's a lot there that we still don't know. And you've mentioned there is this compendium book. I've got it over there on the shelf, as a matter of fact. You gave it to me. Um, that has a bunch of short stories in it that kind of cover some things, but it's not just going to cover the 30-year gap. It covers like the world of the Expanse, right? And has
Mhm.
stories about their development and everything else.
Yeah, the first one's called "The Butcher of Anderson Station," which is, of course, the
Anderson, no, Fred Johnson,
yeah. I'm sorry. The first one's "Drive." Excuse me. Explains how
the Epstein Drive came to be.
exactly, and then the Butcher of Anderson Station, and yeah, that's a great one because in the show they do, I remember correctly, they show what happens for the Butcher of Anderson Station,
Hmm.
but even the short story gives you more details because they actually show the direct aftermath of what happened to Fred Johnson, etc. I really like the short stories. They do a very interesting job of explaining the characters. Um, and yeah, so the one in between book 7 and book 8, which I mentioned to you earlier today, is about the system called Oberon or Oberon, however you want to say it, where Naomi is briefly kind of in limbo in this book. And it turns out that the character Eric from the show season 6 and from book 6, yeah, he was in book 6, the one that Amos goes back for and talks with and helps they escape Earth when Earth is affected by the planetary. I think that was season 5 actually. Excuse me, season 5, book 5, when the asteroids are hitting Earth, the rocks are being dropped on Earth. They escape. The one with the shriveled arm, his
Hmm.
character reappears in that short story, which
His
is a
name was Eric,
follow up.
right?
Yeah, and it's a really interesting follow up to book 7. I won't. Eric's character is important to the plot, but I won't say anything. I won't say any spoilers about what happens. So when you read it, you'll get to enjoy that book
Okay.
or that short story. But yeah, there is none that's set between book seven and sorry, book six and book seven like that. There is the short story that explains what happens to the little girl, little boy who become zombified through the drones, but that's from the show season six. They
Mm.
incorporated that into season six. It's not presented as any sort of tie over in terms of what's been happening. It's just what happened when the colony of Laconia first was starting. It was an important event because we find out here in book seven what happened to those kids. Turns out, like you said, they've been Cortazar's little play toys. They've been in his care for however long. And
Well, so I mean, they
yeah,
even say in the book he's had them for at least 20 years,
mm,
and I mean that was like you said. We see this in if you watch the show season six, they start you with the people first coming to Laconia and establishing the first kind of colony on Laconia,
right.
and what happens to these children is it's interwoven throughout that first part of the season, and these are the same children in the book that so we know that um now several years past Laconia is um, fully colonized and developed, and yet he's got these children locked away, and they've been there ever since the discovery of what happened to them. They've
Right.
basically been put away here. So, yeah, it makes sense that he's fascinated by them, of course, because it's been 20 plus years, and they are still children. They have
Hmm.
not aged. They are
Yeah.
just dead, which has which makes sense why Cortazar would be interested in them because he does have this bent on how can I survive forever.
Right.
And then it also has great implications for one of our favorite characters because the same thing that happens to the children happens to him. And
Yep.
so now effectively he's immortal or at least going to be extremely long lived,
Can
you
you
know.
imagine Immortal Amos? Oh man.
Of all the characters, right? Of all the characters to get the supposed immortality, our ruthless psychopath killer gets it.
Yeah,
Great.
Cortazar. He would have had a great time together if they had just gotten along.
Right. Right.
Yeah, I feel bad. So I'll just explain a little fun story for our audience. Um, I came upon the character of Timothy. Teresa has a friend Timothy that she goes to visit, and after some short reading, you can read between the lines and you realize it's Amos. And I texted you, it's Amos, uh, and you were like, "Yep," or something. I forget, but
Yeah, no, because I had just recently got to that part. See, what threw me off, because again, full disclosure here, I started reading this book long before David did, because again, my schedule and stuff that I have to do sometimes throws me off, and there'll be days where I can sit and I can just read at a leisurely pace, and it's no problem. But then like, that'll
for
be
a
a
whole week
Monday,
you can't
right?
do
That'll
that.
be Monday, and then I won't be able to pick the book up again until, like, maybe the next Monday
Yeah.
whatever. So, it's obviously taken me a while to get through it, so it was so upsetting because here I was thinking I was doing great, man. I'm going along at a great clip, I'm getting in, some good pages here, and I just read that part, and then I told David, I was like, "Yeah, go ahead, start the book. Well, I'll keep going, I'll be finished, whatever else." Like, the next day, he texts me, "It's Amos." And I was like, "You're already to that part?" Like, that took me like a month before I got there. What are you talking about?
Yeah.
And then like the next text I got after that was, "Oh, and I'm done." And I'm like, and then even tonight, I was just like, well, I still have to get through like
Last little bit,
the
yeah.
last chapter here.
Well, the reason I was telling
Man.
this whole story is because I then got to the part where Amos dies. He's killed in a raid because Teresa accidentally brings her guardians to him, and Amos finally buys it. And I was like, "No, he's dead!" And you're like, "Spoilers!" I
Yeah,
was like,
he read it like
"Sorry."
at noon he was like, "Oh, it's Amos," and then at 4 o'clock he was like, "Amos is dead," and I'm like, "Shut the hell up!" Like, give me a second. I haven't gotten off work yet to read the book. Can you
Yeah.
like,
I hope he comes back as a zombie guard dog
right?
thingamajig.
And I'm
Oh,
like,
great, he did. You're like Shut up already.
It's like I should have waited until I was done
uh,
and then told him to read the book
yeah,
because
I
it
thought
would,
when you said spoilers, you were like trying to keep your mouth shut. For me, you were like you finish it, then we'll talk,
uh,
as opposed to like, hey, hold on a
no,
second,
for
don't say
me that was
anything.
totally selfish. Like, shut up, let me get there.
I feel really
So
bad. I was like, oh God, sorry, sorry.
it's
Uh,
okay. The number of times I have spoiled things for you in regards to Star Trek, I'm sure it makes up for it
uh,
in some regards.
no, I
Um,
feel bad. I feel bad.
I'm glad
Uh,
though that I did read this before you, only because if you had told me about Avasarala before I got to the part myself about Avasarala, I it would have severely strained our friendship because I love that character so much, and I was not
yeah,
ready for her
line
death.
one, first thing in the book.
Oh
Yeah.
my god, I'm not kidding. It just
Well, I'm not. I haven't
uh,
cracked. I haven't even cracked open book nine yet. I don't plan on cracking open book nine until you are ready to talk about it. So
so
next
on
time,
that point,
when you are like
on
when when you are like done, you let me know because I
yeah,
will
right.
try and get
I'm
there
like
right
I'm not
away.
telling you a thing until I'm like I don't even know how many chapters it is yet, but like if it's 50 chapters, I'm not telling you anything until I'm like midway through chapter 50. Then I'll say,
Yeah,
"Oh yeah, you can read now."
yeah,
But I will be starting it tomorrow because I want to know how the series ends, how they wrap this up, and it'll be the first series of books I've completed since Dune,
yeah,
and I'm kind of excited for it because I mean it's just like I said, like my schedule keeps me so busy, and it throws me off because I feel like so many times I'm not that busy, but then I swear that the moment you try to focus on getting something like this done, you realize just how many things you do all day that
mm,
keep you from it. And I will admit, oddly, it makes me miss my mattress selling days. Not because I love that job, but because of the inordinate amount of free time I had to sit and read and
well,
study and go
that's
through
why I
things.
can catch
And
up, man.
I
That's
mean,
100% it.
that job, I mean, seriously, working there and you're there 8, 10, sometimes 12 hours, sometimes longer than that. And you'd have what? At least, you could have at least 2 to 3 hours before you saw someone. I mean, of course you can read a lot
Yeah,
of uninterrupted silence, perfect setup to read. You're comfortable, got a nice drink, air conditioned room, no one's bothering you. Man,
it's
it was
true.
lovely. It was
Yeah,
lovely.
I mean,
You
I
just
try and read 50 pages a day. Last year, I was trying to read 75 pages a day, but I was definitely kind of exhausting myself. So I toned it down to 50 pages a day this year. But one thing I'll just say quickly, it was kind of fun about this book is like every chapter was exactly 10 pages. I don't know if you noticed that. Exactly 10 pages every time. I was so happy. I was like, you
I
can knock
wonder
out.
I did notice that it seemed like they certainly had a rhythm.
Yes.
And now that you point that out, I wonder if they've done that for all because I didn't notice that in any of the other books. I just kind of picked up on a pace in this one
Yeah.
that I didn't notice in the others, and maybe that's why I like this book so much more
Hmm.
because things like that I find, I guess, comforting, reassuring, whatever.
Right.
And I wonder if like where they came up with that. Like we're telling this story. We're sticking to just these pages. So make sure it's kind of a distilled down, just the facts. We're not talking about anything else because we got to get it in 10 pages. We can't go over that. We've got to
Right.
get it in 10 pages. So I think that's a great tool for
Yeah.
writing a book to make sure that what you're telling, the story that you're telling is both engaging and connected, and
Hmm.
that it moves, that
Yeah.
it stays going, stays consistent, and that you're not giving a bunch of filler. Like, did you just write 10 pages, but 3 pages of that is scene description and fluff that's not necessary? Or is it all integral to the story that you're trying to tell? They did a great job here of giving us just what we needed to move from the next to the next next. And I like that they related the last chapter to the next chapter. There were hardly ever major jumps,
Yes.
So
Yeah. The
I like
plot
that a
is
lot.
flowing continuously. That's true.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, these guys are really good writers. We've already talked about how their next series, starting with The Mercy of Gods. I don't know what the series is called at the moment, but the first book, The Mercy of Gods. Um, yeah, it'll be fun to when we finish this, move on to that, and have a new series to kind of go along with, as opposed to like catch up here.
Hmm.
Uh, come a little lately here to the Expanse, but yeah, to follow along with the new series as the new ones come out. Because they're great. They're great
They
reading.
are. And there's another book that I also think that we should read that's related to this. It's called The Expanse and Philosophy. So
Ah, yes.
um, apparently, this series had both because of the books and the television series has garnered so much attention and notoriety that people have put together like kind of another little anthology, I guess, compendium
Yes.
of essays and various other writings about the world of the expanse and their take on various aspects of the book, the
Stay
culture,
right
belief.
there.
I'm
Keep talking.
assuming
Stay
that
right
David has
there.
it right. It's about transhumanism, environmental crises, colonialism, just the ever changing face of humanity as it continues to develop, and what the expanse kind of implies through all of these books. So it's called The Expanse and Philosophy. It's available
You
right
sure
now
it's
on
not called
Amazon.
Inception in philosophy, or Game of Thrones in philosophy, or The Matrix in philosophy, or The Ultimate Star Wars in philosophy, or Batman in philosophy, or Ender's Game in philosophy, or The Ultimate Harry Potter's Guide to Philosophy? As soon as you said that, I was like, oh, I have some of those books.
So
That was from my time in college. That was a long time ago.
I never thought I would see a day where someone would out nerd me, but it just happened, and I don't know how to reconcile. I I don't know. Um, wow,
Yeah, I
wow,
would
man. I
love
I
to
mean,
read
like
that. That looks
seriously.
amazing.
But yeah, I just became aware. Back to our book here, I just became aware that it's available. It's on Amazon, both in. I think it's just available in paperback right now. I don't know if they have it in hardcover. It's like $15, so I was thinking
Yes.
that I would get that as well. Um,
Yeah.
and then we can, once we finish the series, kind of go through that as well and talk about like what they say versus how we kind of interpreted things. Um, I'm always interested in things like that. I didn't know they had various and philosophies of other things. That
Yeah.
means that there's probably a Star Trek one out there. There's probably a couple of Star Trek ones out there. And
I believe so. It's been a while since I've looked at this series. I'm on Amazon now, of course, and I'm trying to see if I can figure out where else the rest of the series is located. Uh, Irwin is the name of the series editor. So anyway, I can look that up,
mhm.
and I'm sure I can figure it out. But yeah, the that series is really a lot of fun because they have a different person write a different chapter. So whatever thought this philosopher has and wants to talk about this book or this series, they bring up a whole bunch of
You
range of
know,
issues, and
what an interesting job to have. What
yeah.
Just introduce yourself. Hi, I'm Perry. Job philosopher. Like, how do you get that title? What does that business card look like?
Yeah.
And I would love just, well, pause it if you will. You sit there and just pontificate about whatever you want to because you have philosopher in your name. How do I get that? I
Right.
need to know. You know. But yeah, I'm looking at getting that next. I'm always very interested in stuff like that, so I'm surprised that I didn't know they had them for others. But the more that I think about it, the more I'm not surprised because you listed off all those ones that you have. And
Yes.
while I read a lot of those series, I would never be interested in the philosophy behind them. Like the Game of Thrones uh, didn't impress me enough to get. Now, granted, I only watched the show. I never read any of the Game of Thrones books, so maybe I would feel differently had I read the books. But I read the Harry Potter books. I have no interest in the philosophy behind those books.
Yeah, some of those
Yeah,
I would definitely say the philosophy is kind of straightforward. So how deep do you really need to
yeah,
go?
right.
Frankly,
But the Expanse book to me seems just more grounded because it's definitely about um, the expansion of the human experience, of human
yeah,
culture,
this is
of
a more
yeah,
adult series, and therefore can ask more serious questions than Harry
yeah,
Potter does. I mean, I'm not to say that Harry Potter didn't have its own sophistication to it, but it's definitely meant for like kids to teens.
right. It definitely, yeah, definitely has a an age range there of
Hmm.
who would be into that, you know. So,
Right,
and even if you were, let's say, you were a more mature kid who read The Expanse, I don't feel like you reading a book called The Expanse of Philosophy would hit you the same way it would someone older who's lived a little bit more, experienced a bit more, you
right,
know. Like, let's say that you were the same age as the characters when the book first started. You were in your early 20s and you read the series and you went and read this book. You probably wouldn't get as much out of it as someone who was, say, in their 40s and 50s who had read the series and then read that book. I just don't think they'd be the same.
right.
So, but yeah, check that out. Also, next. So, we'll get there if anyone is interested, of course. So, final thoughts on Tiamat's Wrath.
Oh, great series, great books. Like I said, the Three Body Problem is a series that takes the serious angle, like takes the science very seriously, the aliens very seriously. It's actually a bit of a downer series because it has kind of a pessimistic worldview. Um, the Red Rising books, which I read
We
last year.
need that. We need that though. We need a more pessimistic viewpoint.
Oh man,
We
it.
need more of them.
I know you like darker stories, man. It definitely has that, and
I just, but I know I said final thoughts, and this can all be in there. 'Cause I just realized we got a couple of things we need to talk about.
oh sure,
Um, but yeah, no, I that right there, that we the pessimistic viewpoint when it comes to things in sci-fi, I feel like is absolutely necessary because we've completely flooded the market with optimistic stories of how eventually everything will work out. Everything will be fine.
right,
I think we need more stories that say, absolutely no, it won't. It can be a total dumpster fire.
right.
Or it could end in, odd compromises where nobody wins. And we need those stories to kind of balance it out. And I don't feel like we've gotten there yet with, I guess, market saturation when it comes to stories like that. So they always want to equivocate and, well, we need to give some kind of victory to our hero. Well, why? Why? People lose. It's important to recognize that people lose because if you always believe that you just have to be the right kind of right to win, then you will focus more on the winning than you will on learning the lesson. So
Yeah,
I think you
I
need
am
that.
I would be really curious to hear your thoughts on the 33 Body Problem series. And it's all three books, to be very clear. Um, in fact, it's actually book two that the author introduces his actual philosophy of what's going on. Book one sets the stage, but book two is actually arguably the more important book in terms of what he's trying to say.
Okay.
And book three, of course, brings that to conclusion. So.
Okay.
But yeah, the other
I'll
thing I
check
was going to
that out.
say is just that the Red Rising book series has a very similar kind of futuristic sci-fi tone, but really drives in the action side. It's a very action-heavy series, very character-laden series. Lots of characters in Red Rising. Really looking forward to that final book coming out. Apparently next year is when that one, the last book will come out. And then of course Dune. Dune's great.
Yeah.
Gosh, so many
Dune,
great
yeah, Dune is
series.
one of those series. I mean, I just feel like you can return to that one again and again and again, and there's just like
Yeah,
a
I
new level of understanding every time that you go through it.
as I was just looking up on my phone the expanse in philosophy, Dune in philosophy popped up right next to it. I was like,
Not
duh, why
surprised,
don't I
right?
have
Yeah,
that
not surprised.
one?
Yeah, why didn't I hear about that before with Dune? Because we've talked about Dune enough, and I've looked it up enough.
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah,
I still
Yeah,
have
not
some of those
surprised.
books I need to read. I haven't got to them yet. I plan on getting
I
to them at
just,
some
I
point.
still just can't bring myself to read anything not written by Frank Herbert. I know that his son got the notes and did the whatever, but I don't consider that,
It's
you
fan
know.
fiction. I will
Yeah,
100% say it's fan fiction. I'll only the only reason I enjoyed some of them is because they, instead of really delving deep into the fascinating philosophy that his father built, they dig deeper into trying to come up with some fascinating conflicts for characters to interact
yeah.
with. They do wrap up the series. They do have some two books that are supposed to be the finale of the series based on the works you, as you said, his father had made. But I do think they're flawed. I don't think I wouldn't have written them the way they did. Not that they didn't make some. They had some great stuff in there, which may have been originally, Frank Herbert's
The
point.
dad's right.
Yeah, his dad's point. But there's some other choices they made which I think were flawed, and they actually set those mistakes up in one of the prequel trilogies they had done. So by the time they got to writing those books and finally wrapping up the series, they had already stumbled in that way, and by that point it was kind of too late. So, but anyway,
See,
still
if Frank
interesting
Herbert
books.
if
If
Frank
you
Herbert
if
had
you're
had some Duarte juice, he could have stayed
yeah,
long enough to finish the story
yeah,
and not let
exactly.
his son take over and corrupt it.
Yeah, the books are for people who, I mean, I'll just say it this way. I have a lot of I have when I read the books, as I have read them, I had a lot of time on my hands, so I had a
Mhm.
chance to read them. But if you're gonna stick with the original six dude books, you should be fine. It's sad that the last book ends on a cliffhanger, and therefore, if you want a conclusion, you have to read the books from his son. Um, yeah, they're not terrible books, but they're not.
They're a departure from what you have
Yeah.
experienced.
And what's so crazy, as I've said before, is like he and his co-author write like one book a year. In fact, I think they finally stopped. They were like James Patterson with
Oh,
just
with his team.
prolific,
Yeah.
coming out. But
Yeah,
anyway,
James. Yeah, we can get into a whole thing about James Patterson. He definitely started strong, but then it was like, man, this turned into a cash cow, and I'm milking it all the way to retirement, man.
he's in like
So
his 70s or 80s already. It's like,
yeah, go ahead and sit
whatever,
down.
whatever.
Go ahead and sit down. You're done.
Yeah.
Oh man. Last but not least, before we truly do wrap this up, we have to talk about the end of Roberta Draper, Bobby Draper.
Oh yeah. I guess
Um,
we didn't really
we
tell
we
her say how
skipped
she
it.
went out.
Yeah. So as we know, Bobby is our hardcore OG Martian Marine. She has, come a long way from being that very, idealized soldier to this older woman who is in command now of first the Rocinante and then finally the Gathering Storm, the ship that they pirated from Laconia.
Laconia. Mhm.
And very successful mission that she led, which of course made her the de facto captain. She's learning about the ship and all the things that it can do. She stumbles upon the antimatter that they use to then blow up the, what was it called? The something
The
Tempest?
whirlwind. Was it the turbo one or the Tempest? I always
The
forget which one's
Tempest.
which.
The whirlwind is the last one that they don't destroy, that
Yeah.
Naomi doesn't
The
destroy.
heart of the Tempest, the eye of the storm. No, the eye of the what?
The Gathering Storm. And then
There's the
the Eye of
gathering
the
storm,
Whirlwind.
eye
Yes.
of the whirlwind. Yeah, and then there's the what's the last one? The eye of the storm, the heart of the tempest. That's what it was. The
Yeah.
heart of the
Yeah.
tempest.
Heart of the
I love
Tempest
those
was
names.
first.
Those were
Yeah.
great names.
Heart of the Tempest was the very first one that we see. Then the Gathering Storm was the one that they pirate. And
Yeah,
then the Whirlwind. What did you say it was?
the eye of the whirlwind.
Eye of the Whirlwind is the last one that was protecting Laconia that doesn't leave, doesn't
Well,
go through the Laconia gate.
well, there's the eye, the heart, and the
Whirlwind.
no. But there were three main ships.
That's
There
it.
was there was one. The gathering storm, the one they steal, is not a full on one of the three
Oh, the Magnetar
flagships.
class. Yeah, they
Yes.
have the Magnetar class ships, and then
Yeah. The
the
heart of the
Storm is a
tempest,
small one.
the eye of the hurricane, and the heart of the something, heart of the typhoon,
There,
typhoon.
yeah, that does sound. You know what? We've got the thing.
We gotta look it up.
I'm gonna just do it really quick.
Yeah. Looking up the book doesn't make sense.
Oh, so there's like a whole bunch of stuff here. Really quick. We have there are only three Magnetar class ships that were ever constructed. The first one was the Heart of the Tempest. The second one was
That's
the
it.
Eye of the Typhoon. And then you had the Voice of the Whirlwind.
Voice of the Whirlwind. Okay, got it.
Yes.
Yes. Okay, I'm looking at
Yes.
it now too. Yeah.
Interesting. But anyway,
Ugh.
so Bobby, they
Yeah.
take another
Yeah.
pirated ship, the Gathering Storm, and go after the Tempest, and they end up destroying the Tempest. And that's her
Right.
final mission, using the antimatter to blow up the Tempest. And
Right.
again, what a way to go. She's on
Well, it was
that
a great
little
battle
ship. She's
too.
on that little,
Yes.
yeah, she's on that little clunker
Like
of
a
a ship
skiff.
because they had been in battle with the Tempest before, and they had damaged it, and they damaged one of the sensor relays. There was a blind spot, a narrow blind spot on the ship, and so she's flying this little BS clunker thing, and she
Yeah.
has to stay within this path of the blind spot. If she deviates even a little, they'll see her. So
Right.
meanwhile, the pirated ship and all the other ships are out there to draw the Tempest out, and they're just hail of bullets. And it's like, no one look out this window.
Yeah.
This little Martian right here. No one look
Yeah.
over there. You know, keep
Yeah.
away. I loved I did love that whole lead up, and that's what
Yes.
I was imagining in my head the whole time. Was it's like this massive space battle, and the PDCs are everywhere, and the fast moving missiles, and all the ships, and the lasers, and all this stuff going on, and there's like
This
beep
little dinky ship.
beep
Yep.
beep beep. Like that's what I kept picturing the whole time. I was like, no one notices, and again, just think about it with all that stuff going on, they're flying around and they're ducking and dodging bullets and everything else. She has to continue to maneuver this thing, make those course adjustments to keep her in this blind spot the whole time. It's a heck of a thing for a
Hmm.
person to be able to do. And it's just her on the
Well,
ship.
she had a pilot with her, but that woman dies very quickly,
Yeah.
and the missile with the antimatter in it gets damaged. And so, who is going to have to pilot her mech suit out into the ether
hmm
and deliver it in person? And who doesn't bat an eye to do just
Not
that?
even we don't, and that's the thing. We don't even get like that. Like we didn't even get the chapter from her perspective of doing it, which would have been fantastic. Of
Yeah.
her having to make that decision, the realization that the only way to complete this mission, this very important mission, that she's going to have to crawl into that Laconian armor and jump out there and attach it and do that. Like
Well,
just
they kind of do it. I mean, it is from
no, but
Alex's perspective
it's
that we
from
see it.
that's what I'm saying. Like I wanted it. I wanted those chapters back to back. I wanted Bobby giving me all of that right up to that last minute, and then it takes over from
Well, that is what happened.
Alex. That no, like it wasn't enough. Like I wanted,
Okay.
I
Well,
wanted
just
her
to
to.
just for clarification, just so we're on the same page, Bobby and her pilot are in the ship. They're in the blind spot. The pilot gets killed. The missile is damaged. She's looking at it, and she starts talking to Alex like, "I got it." And we
Mhm.
realize because that's the end of the chapter, and then goes to Alex's perspective, and we see that
Yes,
what
yes, and that's what I'm
Alex.
saying.
It's from
Yes,
Alex's perspective, we really fully realize that she is committed to the suicide run. She
yes.
is jumping out. She is gonna deliver the payload herself. She shoots her guns off at the ship. It's massive. She's not doing a single thing all by herself, but
But she was
she's
gonna go
still,
out firing. That's
yeah,
Bobby. She went out firing. She was
yeah,
making sure that the universe was aware of Roberta Draper before it
exactly,
was all said and done.
exactly.
So yeah, I mean, what a way to go. I just fantastically well done character. just
Yeah.
I love. I think I like Bobby from the moment that they introduced the character. Like I never had a problem with her. I never thought that she was kind of a because sometimes they do this with particular with female characters where they want them to be these badasses, right? They want them to be these very hardcore militaristic types, and it's like, oh, basically, um, scratch out whatever her name is and put in standard dude name A, and it could very well be a male character.
Right.
I don't feel like we got that here. I feel like we got a well fleshed out, nuanced character throughout the development of the series
Right.
that I mean, she's very much her own person. And I really
Yeah.
enjoyed her overall development. And so to see her kind of not necessarily return to this, but stay consistent in the
Yeah.
manner of
Even 30 years later or whatever.
30
Yeah.
years later, she is still a Marine. She is still going to complete the mission, and she understands that her sacrifice is going to lead to something greater, and she does it.
Right.
And I mean, we don't know, but I mean, we are left to assume she does it without hesitation. She puts on the suit, she gets the missile, and she jumps.
Right.
And we see that from Alex's perspective. So, yeah, great character.
Yeah.
Fitting, sad end, sure, but very fitting for her.
Yeah, I just want to say, Frankie Adams is the actress who played her on the show, and every time, I mean, all the actors so fit their characters so well that by the end, I'm reading these characters, and not only am I hearing Avasarala, with Shreya Dashlu's voice, but Holden and the
Forever and
rest of them.
always.
But
Forever and always. Yeah, I
yeah, and
mean,
Frankie Adams, she was Bobby Draper.
yeah.
She did a great job playing her. Um,
Tara G, who played drummer, I
yes,
can't imagine another person in that role. I mean, and you're right. For all of the characters, I feel like the actors they did a great job of finding actors to embody those characters well.
right.
But there are some of them that I feel like if they were to do a recasting, I'd be okay with it for some of them. But
Oh,
like because I could see them kind of redoing the show at some point.
oh,
The
sure, a
because
redo.
the
Okay,
books and everything else have gained in notoriety, and the attention is there. So I feel like I could see them being like, hey, 10 years, 20 years have passed. Those actors are, kind of past their prime, and instead of doing the obvious thing, which is continue the story, they'll be like, no, we want to retell it. We want to redo it. Because that's Hollywood for you. They always just want to start again. And I could
say
see
Harry
that.
Potter for me. Why don't you? Sheesh.
Oh, I mean, well, Harry Potter is already slated to be a new TV show.
That's what I'm
Haven't
saying.
you
Like,
heard?
no, I think that's exactly what I'm saying.
Oh yeah, oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
Why? Like, I mean, talk about cash grab. Talk about people who have no new ideas. They have nothing else to give us. They're just gonna milk everything to death. I refuse on principle to watch it. I will not watch that show.
I don't think I'm gonna watch it. Not because I'm all I've already Harry Potter is only ever supposed to be this or any of that. But more because, like we were saying earlier about Harry Potter, I feel like it's a show for a certain age demographic, and I no longer fit that demographic. And so
That
for
is
me
certainly
to,
part of it. Yeah.
yeah, for me to be like, oh, I'm gonna watch this show in anger, I feel like it's just weird. Like it's not the same as when like I deal with the same thing when it comes to like Star Trek, right? And Star Trek, a new series comes out, and people want to shout it down or whatever. Um, but this Star Trek is supposed to be for literally everyone. There's supposed to be something there for everyone. You may not like every episode, but there should be enough in on the whole for
Right.
everyone to enjoy at some point. Um, this Harry Potter thing to me is not that. It's a show about kids in their formative years of schooling and young
Right.
adulthood and coming into all of that and everything else. I'm well past that. So I'm not going to watch that show, and I'm certainly not going to watch the show and be critical of it because it's like, well, that's not what they did in the books, or that's not what the movie that I watched did, blah 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 blah.
So, quick question for you though. I mean, you have a daughter who would actually be the right age for the characters if she were to watch it, or maybe even read the books for the first time. I don't know if she would like that kind of thing if she enjoys books or if she enjoys reading like
So
that yet. But
my daughter is very fickle, and so she's got this thing. She's in the stage now where she doesn't like to let me know that she enjoys things. So, I get it now that I'm again on the other side of it, when parents would talk about, how they felt like they kind of had to spy on their kids a bit to know what they're up to, because they don't, sometimes they just don't want to tell you stuff. And it's not because they're necessarily doing anything bad or whatever, but they've kind of got it in their head that there's suddenly this need to keep things private.
they want
And
some
I mean,
privacy. I can
yeah,
understand that.
right. And so, but at the same time, as a person who loves them, cares for them, and wants them to have things that are reflective of the things that they like, you, you got to ask the question, what do you like?
Yeah.
And so when the response is always, well, I don't know. Mm, well, yeah. When that's the response, you feel desperate enough that you're like, okay, well, I'm going to go and I will check, I will
Right.
peek, I will
Yeah.
whatever. So that's kind of where we are right now. And so it's
Right.
like, yes, I know I'm invading privacy or whatever, but at the same time, it's like I do it out of love. I just want to be able to get you the thing that I know that you like. So all of that said, um, I know that she has not read the Harry Potter series, but we have started a few of the books, and so I know she's got some interest.
Mhm.
I just don't know if I can get her to a point where she's read all the books and then can watch the show. And then part of me is like, maybe I shouldn't even let her read the books, just let her watch the show, because the show is inevitably going to be
The
different
books.
from the
Oh, well, yeah,
books. It's
sure. Yeah.
going to be different. And
Right.
so I don't want her to watch the show and be like, well, none of that was in the book,
Right.
you know,
Just enjoy the
versus
show for the show.
right. Because I feel like sometimes it works out better that way, to watch the show and enjoy the show and then be like, "Oh, you like the show so much. Here's the books that it was based off of." And then you read them, and I think it's easier to
Read them
work through your
sometimes.
differences, yeah, than it
Or
is to
yeah.
see them.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
think
It's
we'll
it.
go that route.
I've definitely. I mean, I think I've said it every time we watched the Expanse show versus the books. I loved the books, but maybe it was because I watched the show first. There was definitely a part of me that was like, I liked the show version better. I would argue that's in part because the authors had been a part of the show, and therefore they got like a second go at the plot and like
Mhm.
worked out different kinks in
No,
it.
and I always agree with your assessment on that. I felt like the same thing was true. Like I certainly watched the show first. That's how I became aware of any of this.
Hmm.
Um, oh, and honestly, I only became aware of the books because we were towards the end of our run of the show, and they were like, "They're not doing any more." And I was like, "What do you mean there's no more? You got to give me more." I'm like, "I'm in. I'm invested. You got to give me more." And then so I was like, "Oh well, there's books. Done. Sold. Give them to me."
Yeah, yeah,
You know.
yeah.
But yeah, and I've agreed with your assessment. Like, since, because I we read the first book and then I immediately went back and I watched the first season, and
Hmm.
I was just like, yeah, the book is good. Don't get me wrong, but the show definitely seems like they're second at bat, and they're
Yeah,
knocking out those kinks that they had from the book, the logistics that they couldn't make work in the book, they made work for the show.
right.
Yeah,
Yeah,
one of the few times where I felt like the show was an improvement upon the book, not a detraction. So.
yeah. Once you can get the original author involved, like intimately involved with the storytelling, that's actually true. On a side note, one of the books I read last week. It was a shorter book. It was called Dark Matter, and that was made into a TV show called Dark Matter. I mentioned that, I think, to you today at lunch. We had got
Mhm.
lunch today, and the book is fine. It's actually, to me, I felt like the book very much felt like a airport read or like an
Mm.
airplane read. Like you buy it at the airport while you're on the plane, you're trying to read something, and it's very quick and easy. And by the time you're off the plane, you finished it. That's it. That's how it felt to me. The TV show is again an improvement on the book because the author was able to include more details and to correct some of the, I think, flaws that when I watched the show first, read the book, and there were definitely some things in the book was like, I'm glad he changed that for the show. Um, it made more sense to do that for the show. Um,
Mhm.
so yeah, there are definitely times when actually the show can be better as long as you got the original author involved. So
Well, not always, because here's looking at you, George R. R. Martin. Um, you know, and I blame a lot of that on him, because he
mm,
just I I hate to say it, but he strikes me as lazy. And I don't know if that's true or not. I have no idea what his day to day is like, but I just feel like he's dragging out his own series, and the man's not exactly the pinnacle of elderly health, and so it's just like don't do that to your fans. Like
It,
I feel like at this point you've got to accept there's some responsibility to getting this done, and he's just like, nah, I'm gonna go
yeah.
on another vacation.
Well, apparently fans complain that he loves to like write about his favorite sports teams, like whatever his basketball team's doing. Like my basketball team last night sucked. It's like we don't care about your basketball team, bro. Write about the book. I
And
my theory is that the show ended on some level like what he was planning for the books, and people didn't like how the show ended, and he has a giant writer's block called the TV show on him.
I would agree. I think when they initially started the show, I bet you he felt like there was enough material there for them to use for a long time
Mm,
that he wouldn't really have to worry about it. And
mhm,
he didn't expect the response
mhm.
that the show got. And then people were just eating it up. And so all of a sudden, the timeline for everything became significantly shorter, and he had nowhere to go. And so
Right.
then it became, hey, I have these understudies, I guess is the way to think about them, these apprenticed writers that I typically bounce ideas off of and whatever else. Why don't we do something like that for the show? And so then you had these people who knew the books and knew whatever, but they also had their own ideas for what they wanted the show to be about and what they wanted to do. Just like, Frank Herbert's son, he had he had his dad's notes, but he's not his dad. He's got his
Right.
own ideas. And so before you know it, the show took on a whole other angle or whatever. And Martin is just like, he's just like the rest of us. And he watches this stuff and becomes influenced by this stuff. And whereas that may not have necessarily been his original idea, he can't get that out of his head because he's watched it now, he's experienced it. And like you said, he has the added benefit of hearing all the criticism that those development turns got.
Yep.
And now he's kind of like in this weird paralysis. He
Yeah.
doesn't want to write anything that's going to also put him in that vein. It's like,
Right.
but if you would stop talking about sports teams and donuts and sit your ass down and get over there and run, bang it out, we wouldn't have this problem.
Yeah.
Or maybe, I mean, you've made enough money. Here's a wild suggestion.
Right.
You've made enough money. You're not going to be able to spend it all before your inevitable time comes. So why don't you go ahead and finish the books, like finish your series, be done with it, but then have a clause that it can't be released until, I don't know, 6 months after you're gone.
Right.
You know, there you go. Now, problem solved. The book is done. You don't have to worry about facing the criticism. You've made your money. You've set up your stuff. They cannot come after you,
Right.
at least not while you're living. And when you're dead, why would you care?
Right.
So that's like John Malkovich has that movie that won't come out for 100 years. So everybody in it, everybody who could possibly see it, we'll all be dead before the movie comes out.
Yep.
So I would love it if the movie was just absolutely terrible, and then it's just like, there you go. So
Yeah. Yeah.
well, all right, I think that is going to do it. We are just at the hour and 30-minute mark of our show. So I'm going to say this is perfect timing for us. We haven't really done that in a while. So, as I said, we will be moving on to book nine. Do you know what the ninth book is titled? The final one?
It's called Leviathan Falls. The first
Leviathan
book was called
Falls.
Leviathan Wakes.
Wakes.
Leviathan Falls. Yep.
All right. So we will be starting that one. I will, and I'm going to try to start it tomorrow, as a matter of fact. So we will go from there. We will also next week be returning to our regularly scheduled content, which is Star Trek Deep Space Nine, Season 7, moving on through there. You can check out all of our episodes on YouTube, of course. And if you just need something to listen to while you drive, you can listen to us on Spotify or anywhere you happen to access podcasts. Just look for the Fire Caves, and that's us. So, guys, until next week, take care of yourselves.
Thanks, guys.